Hello and welcome to episode 7 of my Kerbal Career. This time we are starting right off with the Minmus lander vessel, and we have just encountered Minmus. So our goal is to land. Now of course what I'm going to be doing here is burning both prograde and toward Minmus. Since the gravity is so low, we do want to get a bit closer, while of course we're slowing down to get captured. Now you can just see me playing around with all of the other mods, trying to get it so my periapsis is in a good enough place, as well as actually getting to orbit. And my main goal here is trying to figure out where I'm landing. Since this vessel is so tall with the 3-segmented solid rocket booster, the landing site is very important. And I wanted to land on the salt flats, however things did not go as I planned, and I end up landing elsewhere. However, it turns out that the SAS is strong enough on this vessel that it didn't really matter where I landed. However, where I am landing does not allow me to gather science like I had anticipated. So I'm now heading in the opposite direction. So I've bled all of my horizontal velocity, and I will just let gravity slowly bring me back down to the surface. Of course, last time we landed on Minmus, it was shown in a very choppy and just awful video recording glitch. But when you land on Minmus, for those of you who have never actually landed on Minmus, it's very low gravity, so it's a very slow fall. However, don't become, I guess, too confident in the safety of how slow you fall, because you still accelerate. So the closer you get, it's actually noticeable how much your thrust to weight ratio changes. Like if you see my thrust to weight ratio right now is going down, actually quite significantly, just because of how much more gravity affects you the closer you are to Minmus. And of course that's true for all very low gravity planets and bodies. So I'm getting this awful feeling that this is actually on a mountainside, and landing here is going to be next to impossible for me. But we're still over a kilometer up, so we will just have to see. Now the reason I really like Flight Engineer over using just this is that this is sea level. This would be good if we're landing on those flat salt beds, but since we're actually landing on a mountain, you can see that we're much less than what we're being told. So it's very helpful for distinguishing the actual height from the surface you are. So speeding things along, because this was a slow landing, I just kind of drift slowly down in fears of the slope beneath. Now, I have a problem with getting myself to go straight down, whereas I'm kind of going downways at a side, and right about now is when I actually notice the real slope. Of course we bounce, and I do eventually settle down into a landing, and if you look you can actually see that the SAS is strong enough to hold me up on only a couple of the pegs that I have for legs. So there was a small glitch in the time, and I'm not trusting it, so nothing really happened during that phase. It was just me restarting my recording session, just in case it decided to go buggy again, because I'm not in the mood for it to mess up anymore. And of course what I'm referencing is that visual glitch where it only recorded one frame every few seconds, in which case I don't want to have any more of those visual bugs, so I figured I'd just play it safe and restart the recording. Now, of course, if you've been watching, I have been gathering all of the science that I can on Minmus, and all that's left to do is to take a surface sample and plant a flag. However, Jebediah will not be doing that today, since if he were to get out of the vessel, then his physics would be applied to wherever the ladder is, and that, since the ladder's on the tilted side, he'd probably knock the vessel over, in which case there'd be no recovering it. So I am just going to leave in Minmus with the science that I have gathered, as well as the contract that I have completed, and we will be returning Jebediah home. Now I'm just going to wait until I'm in orbit around Kerbal to finish burning, and of course I have more than enough fuel, because I'm still using the previous stage, and of course I did plan to have an escape stage, but we still have plenty of fuel in the large stage that we have attached, so might as well use it before we collect our science and stage out into just the pod and its small engine. However, before I decide to just leave this vessel and set an alarm for it, I figure I have enough fuel to try and reduce the time it's going to take me to get to Kerbin. So basically what I do is I create a maneuver node that just tells me where basically the blue circle is, or the toward planet burning. And the reason I do that, of course with a mix of prograde engine firing, is it allows me to, as you saw, bring down the actual arc of the orbital trajectory, in which case it reduces my time by about 2 days before I get to my periapsis. And of course then I set my alarm 45 minutes in advance, and go back to launch my next vessel. So of course back to the launch pad, which we seem to visit very often, and this time I am launching a vehicle capable of bringing down the space station. And by that I mean it's got a big claw on it and a lot of parachutes. So the idea is that we will, of course, spin out in the atmosphere as all of my launch stages go. But we're going to be bringing down the space station because I want to add the reworked models and textures for Infernal Robotics, and to do that, well, I need to remove the space station. Now, of course, I could add them before removing the space station, but then because the legacy parts would be deleted from the game data folder, well, the space station would be deleted. So I figured I might as well bring it down to see if we can't recover anything rather than just having it pretty much wiped off the face of the existence. Yes, the face of the existence, no longer wiped out of existence or wiped off the face of the world, but wiped off the face of existence, because existence has a face. This is some very deep thinking I want you all to do. Anyhow, we had a launch stage, now we have this transfer stage, and a little tiny maneuvering stage, which I will be using to basically get myself in encounter with the station. Now, my orbit is deliberately set to be lower, and I even lower my periapsis, lower my apoapsis down to about 70,000 meters. That way I catch up to the station. Now, of course, if I wanted the station to catch up with me, as if the station were behind me in orbit, then I would go higher than it. But since it's in front of me, then I keep my orbit lower, and I move faster, so then I eventually will catch up with the station. Transitioning through to where I have my maneuver nodes all set up and toyed with, to the point where I get a separation of about 1.4 kilometers, which is very good for separations. Usually if I'm under 10 kilometers, then I go for the encounter. So once we reach our closest approach, we just set our nav ball to target mode, and burn in the retrograde direction to kill all of our relative velocity. And that will allow us to keep us pretty much stationary with our target, and then we can just burn straight toward our target. So we slowly drift toward the Kerbin station hub, so that of course we can take it down. And I'm just going to time accelerate to get there a bit faster. Now, of course, once I get close, all I have to do is point retrograde, of course with the nav ball in target mode, so it shows all of my velocity that shows me the 11 meters per second. That's all relative to the target. So I can just burn retrograde and cancel all of my relative velocity, which makes me moving at the same speed as it. And then of course point toward my target, and make sure that my prograde marker is sitting over the target, so I'm heading toward it. And you can see that now that I'm getting closer, yet again, I'm just going to wait to burn retrograde for the second time so that I can slow down once I'm close enough to start using RCS. So we get within about 50 meters, and then we slow down, of course bleeding off all our relative velocity to the target, which you can see me doing right there. Now our target is 0.0 meters per second, moving away from us, and this allows us to very easily use RCS to finish the minimal distance we have left in our approach. And as you can see, my pro skills with RCS allow me to very smoothly and easily attach the claw to the back of this space station. And of course, with a little help from the engine, I can regain somewhat control, although none of my dignity. So as I come in slowly to, of course, attach this so that we can drag it away and out of orbit, I eventually manage to get it lined up well enough and slowly drift in. And there we have it, attached relatively in the center, which is good enough. And now, of course, I just need to face the whole thing retrograde and start, well, deorbiting our station. But first, I'm just going to bring back the arms so it's a little more aerodynamically friendly. And as you can see, we're just lowering our periapsis back into the atmosphere as we do with all re-entries, and we're just going to wait. Now, of course, the idea is we'll be able to bring the whole thing back in one piece, recover all of the parts to be used on the next station we bring up in the next episode, and I'm just going to use all of the liquid fuel I have remaining, because I had plenty of it, to slow my descent and make an attempt for that island. Now, the island is a far-fetched dream that I am never actually going to be able to get to, which I realize at about this point and decide to just burn retrograde to slow myself down. That way the solar panels and batteries don't get ripped off by the destructive forces of Ferrum Aerospace's atmosphere, which I do have to admit I enjoy at pretty much every point in time until it's destroying my things. Then I dislike it. But of course, that's typical for just about everything. Oh yes, it's a great mod, but once it breaks my things, I no longer want it. Because of course it broke my things. Now, I don't even realize at this point to retract my satellites, the comm dish arrays, as you can see toward the bottom of, or the top of the station, since it's inverted. So, they actually managed to survive the descent into the atmosphere, and we managed to make the thing back in one piece. So we recovered that, and it's time to move on to yet another launch. Alright, so I did another one of those contract completing vessels that I don't need to waste too much time showing. So we collected science data from around Kerbal. We tested a fusion rocket engine while orbiting Kerbal, a stack decoupler while flying over Kerbal, and a turbojet while flying over Kerbal. Pretty simple, and we got over 450 science from that. So we're just going to take a really fast look into here to spend some of it. And of course what I'm actually going to be spending the science on is going to be the larger docking nodes, the docking port, or the Clampatron Senior. And of course the bigger docking nodes are more stable than the smaller ones, so I'll take that instead. Now, the next thing we have going for us is the Minmus contract completer is on its way back. So, jumping right to it, we have a couple things that we need to do with it first, and that is being to collect the science before, of course, we stage out, because we do want to recover the science, and if we were to stage for just the command module to be in control, then we would lose all of this science, which is a couple hundred. Now, the camera goes really wacky for a little bit and gives me some trouble, but I get it fixed anyhow. And of course, it's time to accelerate down toward Kerbal. Now our alarm went off because we're 45 minutes away our apoapsis, yet we are still so far away. And basically that means we're coming in at about 3 kilometers per second, which is dangerously fast. And of course I try to burn all of the fuel I have to slow my descent to make this a little more bearable. Now ultimately I decide to stage rather than hold the whole thing with me, because even though it would give me more wind resistance to slow down, I feel as though it would become problematic and weigh me down, as well as kind of throw me around just because of how oddly shaped it is. Now, I was coming down much too quickly, so I used the fact that I had very high SAS and control reaction wheels to kind of bend my bottom of the vessel up so I can try to act like a plane and create more drag for myself, basically. Now, of course, since we did that contract previously, The only science we managed to gather was this stuff from our studies, and of course we weren't able to get a surface sample or an EVA report. But Jebediah is back, and we should be able to get one of these lower tier sciences, such as ladders, or more plane parts. And I'm going to opt in to snag the plane parts, as well as the other fairings. Even though I have structural fairings, these are aerodynamic ones, which I want to say weigh less, but I'm not entirely sure. Anyhow, we'll take that. So we can close out of there. And now I have gone ahead and created quite a few vessels. We have a new station hub that we will be sending up into orbit, as well as the power pharmacy. And you'll see why I call it a power pharmacy. It's basically a battery bank, but the batteries, well, they're uniquely shaped. And of course we have a moon base hub, which we'll be sending off after all of these get sent off, and of course after our launch pad reconditions, which it loves to do. It's always reconditioning, and I don't know how I feel about that. Of course we got 2 more tech points, so I'm going to put these right into the second build rate for my VAB. So we are back on the launch pad with the revamped and re-edited station hub. So how about we launch it? Now we have a very nice new engine that we didn't have last time called the Little Mother. And this engine has a decent specific impulse, but even more so 2,000 kilonewtons of thrust. So with this big 3.75 meter tank, as well as these 4 additional procedural liquid tanks, we have more than enough delta V to get into orbit with this one stage. Now those 3 vessels that I showed earlier that I am currently building, such as the battery pharmacy and the moon base hub, those also utilize the Little Mother engine because it's very overpowered for my current technology level. I do have access to the nuclear engines, however I'm still working on liquid fuel because it's faster. But the Little Mother has about 350 ISP in the vacuum of space, as well as having over 2,000 kilonewtons of thrust. So it's very powerful and very useful, and like I said, we will be using it a lot in the future, as well as some guaranteed on the next couple of vessels. I'm going to stage out the fairing now, and we can see the inside is almost an exact replica, except for these right here, the joint pivotrons, which are the model and texture of the revamped pack for Infernal Robotics parts. And of course we have a lot of other new Infernal Robotics parts that comes from the revamped pack, as well as their own kind of rotations and angles. And I believe I used some of them on some of the other vessels I have already designed and are currently in the building process. So we can just finalize our burn, and yep, that will lower my apoapsis actually. So we can lower it, we can burn straight to raise it, and we can just kind of toggle in between. Of course, as we get going so fast, all we can do is raise it. And I'm going to do my best to keep it at 100,000 kilometers. Now, we're actually going to be testing something, and it'll hopefully go well. Now, these 4 parachutes that I have should be enough to slow down the descent of this big stage. And I've attached that little probe body, which you can see right there at the bottom, so that I can attempt to recover this. Because last time I shot a stage out and didn't control it, what happened is I never got a recovery message. I also never got a stage destroyed message. So, to be completely honest, I have no idea what happened to it. And I would like to know. So, okay, that's good enough. It's about 5 kilometers difference in my apoapsis versus periapsis, but it's close enough. Now, of course, those 4 stage did recover. Now our station is in orbit, which is a good thing. Let me open up Infernal Robotics. Now the updated Infernal Robotics also uses electric charge now. So I'm just going to bend these out, and they should... Okay, they're not going to stop at 90. I must not have saved that. Of course, I can just click here, 90, save, click here, 90, save. And now they'll just kind of spring back very violently, and now they're perfectly 90 instead of 90.5. So we'll close that one, close that, and decouple. So there we go, our Kerbal station is in orbit yet again, with of course a little bit of changes to it, but for the most part exactly the same. And that will stick there. Now what this is going to do is, well, it's going to be going back into the atmosphere. So with fractions of reaction wheel control, we just begin to turn it very, very, very slowly. So I've accelerated everything to 4 times. And once I get it fully turned around, I begin to fire the engines and guarantee myself that it will hit the surface of Kerbal by lowering the periapsis into the planet. And I just want to watch this thing crash, and that way I can get confirmation of a message or not. Since it has a probe body, we should hear something from it. There we go. Stage recovered. Is it the right stage? Yes, it is the right stage. So, as long as we have probe bodies attached, then we can throw our parachutes and whatever resources we want into the planet, into Kerbal, and recover them without having to follow them down. So this will allow us to do things like from our cathane miners on the moon, we'll be able to just shoot our cathane fuel tanks with parachutes and a probe core back onto the surface of Kerbal and recover it to hopefully get funds back. Now one thing I'll have to consider is the cost that it takes to build these cathane haulers, these cathane fuel haulers, and of course how much I get back from recovering them, plus the cathane to see if it's really profitable. Otherwise I might have to make trips to Duna and get metal, which is much more valuable. Or because I installed the art mod, I can just go capture asteroids and mine those for valuables. I do need to look at the price of rock just to see how useful that could be to me. Because if rock has, let's say, equal value to liquid fuel, then I can just go bring an asteroid literally to the surface, mine all the rock with the attachments, and recover the thing for, well, recover fuel tanks that I mine the rock out of for huge sums of resources. Of course, I'll have to check on that later. As for now, this brings us to the end of Episode 7 of my Kerbal Career. I thank you all for watching, and this is PTT GRW, signing out.